In 1934, Carl Frederick, a lawyer, conservationist, and champion sport shooter who had won 3 gold medals at the 1920 Olympics, appeared before the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives to speak during hearings on the National Firearms Act, a bill that would strictly regulate the manufacture, sale, transportation, and possession of certain types of firearms, including machine guns and short-barreled rifles and shotguns. When the committee members' questions turned to the subject of self-defense, Frederick spoke in favor of private citizens being able to use guns to protect themselves, their homes, and their businesses. But he also said this: "I have never believed in the general practice of carrying weapons. I seldom carry one. I have when I felt it was desirable to do so for my own protection. I know that applies in most of the instances where guns are used effectively in self-defense or in places of business or in the home. I do not believe in the general promiscuous toting of guns. I think it should be sharply restricted and only under licenses." Oh yeah, there's one more thing I forgot to tell you about Carl Frederick. In 1934, he was the president of the NRA. Here we are, 84 years later. Over 30,000 Americans die from gun-related causes every year. We have more mass shootings more frequently than any other nation in the developed world, and the NRA not only opposes any effort to strengthen the regulation of firearms, it ardently supports policies that allow private citizens to carry firearms openly and concealed, without special permits or training required. The NRA's online store even offers this sharp little number: the Concealed Carry Denim Jacket. Looking to conceal carry in your favorite denim jacket? Now you can with this 100% denim cotton jacket. The left and right concealed pockets have a hook and loop lining with a removable holster and double magazine pouch to support your favorite carry gun. 4 interior heavy-duty pockets allow for the carry of extra magazines, flashlights, or any other gear you may need. What the hell happened? To figure that out, let's go back to the beginning. During the American Civil War, Union General Ambrose Burnside, who commanded troops at Bull Run, Antietam, Fredericksburg, and Petersburg, noticed a problem. His soldiers couldn't shoot. Burnside once estimated that only 1 in 10 of his troops were able to hit the broadside of a barn. Union Army records indicated the situation was even worse than that. It was estimated that only 1 shot in 1,000 actually found its mark. To address this problem, 2 men, W.C. Church and George Wood Wingate, themselves veterans of the Civil War, founded the National Rifle Association in 1871. The organization's first president was Ambrose Burnside. Its first members were mostly Army veterans and members of the National Guard. Union General and former President of the United States Ulysses Grant was an early president of the organization, as was General Philip Sheridan. For the first century of its existence, the NRA's primary focus was teaching people how to shoot. The organization began updating its members on gun-related pieces of legislation in the 1930s. It supported the National Firearms Act of 1934, but it didn't lobby in favor of the bill. Though it was never noted for its fondness of gun regulations, it didn't actively oppose them either. It had little direct involvement in politics and remained mostly nonpartisan. In fact, the NRA didn't have an official lobbying branch until 1975, when the Institute for Legislative Action was founded. The following year, the Political Victory Fund, the NRA's Political Action Committee, was established. But it was the year after that, at the organization's annual meeting in 1977, that the zealous, reactionary, explicitly right-wing NRA we know today was born. But before I tell you about that, let's take another peek at the NRA's store, where you can purchase quality merchandise like this sleek, low-profile wallet. It's made of tough yet supple buffalo hide, has plenty of slots and pockets to hold your cash, ID, and credit cards, and it's lined with an RFID blocking material to prevent e-pickpocketing and keep Big Brother from tracking you. Brought to you by the NRA. We say we're a civil rights organization. The 1960s and 70s had seen a renewed push for increased gun control legislation in the United States. This movement was fueled by the assassinations of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr., public concerns about inexpensive and easy-to-acquire handguns nicknamed Saturday Night Specials, and white conservatives, including then-Governor of California Ronald Reagan, unnerved by the sudden prominence of the conspicuously armed Black Panther Party, among other factors. And while the NRA did not approve of this new wave of gun control, it also offered little in the way of serious disapproval. When the Gun Control Act of 1968 was passed, the executive vice president of the NRA, Franklin Orth, wrote that parts of the law seemed unduly restrictive to law-abiding citizens, but added that the measure as a whole appears to be one the sportsmen of America can live with. Orth had also supported earlier efforts to ban Saturday Night Specials and impose heavier regulations on mail-order gun purchases. But while the NRA officially supported, or more often opted not to oppose, gun control efforts in the 60s and 70s, a faction of its members was growing increasingly frustrated. These were Second Amendment absolutists who objected to any new gun laws, who felt the right to bear arms was being threatened not just by progressive politicians, but by liberals and moderates within their own organization. So, on May 21st, 1977, in Cincinnati, Ohio, at the NRA's annual meeting, the absolutists staged a revolt. Taking advantage of a provision in the NRA's bylaws that allowed members to make changes to the organization's governing structure by vote, the absolutists, who wore blaze orange hunting caps for the occasion, were able to oust several members of the NRA board and change the rules so that the executive vice president would now be chosen not by the board, but directly by the membership. As their new executive vice president, the members chose Harlan Carter, the head of the NRA's lobbying firm, the ILA. In a letter to the membership, Carter described his vision for the NRA in 5 stark words: no compromise, no gun legislation. You'll note Carter did not write no new gun legislation, but rather no gun legislation. That wound up being significant. The first major legislative victory of the new NRA came in 1986 when Congress passed the Firearm Owners Protection Act. It rescinded some of the provisions of the Gun Control Act of 1968, imposed new limitations on the ATF's ability to enforce existing gun laws, and specifically prohibited the U.S. government from creating a national registry linking guns to their owners. And that was all before they put this asshole in charge. But before we talk about how Wayne LaPierre guided the NRA through the final phase of its transformation from a basically rational organization that focused on teaching marksmanship and gun safety to a radically right-wing haven for firearm fetishists, paranoid survivalists, and unhinged anti-government conspiracy theorists, let's take another trip to the official NRA store. Look at this beautiful mahogany-stained mantel clock. Many of you probably have a clock like this in your home right now, sitting in a place of honor over the fireplace, or maybe in the entertainment center in that cubbyhole above the TV. But I bet your clock doesn't have a face emblazoned with the text of the Second Amendment or the NRA logo. And I bet your clock doesn't have a secret compartment to hide a fucking gun in either, does it? Well, this clock does. If you've ever thought, my mantel clock is nice, but it's too bad I can't conceal a medium to large handgun inside it for some reason, then this piece is just the thing. Quality merchandise from the NRA. Maybe there's something wrong with you. Wayne LaPierre joined the NRA as a lobbyist in 1978. He helped write the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986 and pushed Congress to pass it. In 1991, he was elected Executive Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of the NRA. In its first few years under his leadership, the NRA strongly opposed the Brady Bill, which instituted mandatory federal background checks for firearm purchases, and the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which included a 10-year ban on assault weapons. Both pieces of legislation passed, thanks in part to support from former President Ronald Reagan, whose signature had enacted the Firearm Owners Protection Act 8 years earlier. Isn't history weird? During LaPierre's tenure, the NRA has moved even further to the right and taken on a decidedly anti-government tone. Membership grew following civilian deaths during standoffs with federal agents at Ruby Ridge and the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. In response to the newly enacted assault weapons ban, LaPierre sent out a letter to NRA members declaring that, quote, jackbooted government thugs now had more power to take away our constitutional rights, break in our doors, seize our guns, destroy our property, and even injure and kill us. LaPierre's letter was criticized after anti-government terrorists Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols bombed the federal building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people and injuring nearly 700 others. Former President George H.W. Bush resigned his NRA membership in protest over the organization's vilification of federal agents. During his address to the 1993 annual meeting, LaPierre gave NRA members another enemy to fear and unite against: the media. In recent years, this theme has been repeated with increasing urgency as, once again, public support for stronger gun control laws has slowly been gathering in response to mass shootings, including, most recently, the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. In LaPierre's own speeches and in official NRA videos featuring right-wing radio host Dana Lash, the media has been positioned as the enemy of the American people. Dishonest, biased, hostile to conservatives. Earlier this week, in a video promoting her new show on NRA TV, which is also a thing, Lash spoke of the lies, sanctimony, arrogance, hatred, pettiness, and, yes, fake news of the media, declaring, "Your time is running out." Through LaPierre and Lash, the NRA has also warned its members of the threat posed by the elites, a group which includes not only the media, but liberal and progressive politicians, gun control advocates, celebrities, athletes who kneel during the national anthem, critics of Donald Trump, and pretty much anyone who isn't a proud, dues-paying member of the NRA. The NRA has also committed to derailing current efforts to enact stronger gun control measures by insisting the real cause of America's mass shooting epidemic is mental illness. So not only is the organization advancing its interests by attacking the media, celebrities, its political opponents, it's also demonizing people with mental illness, one of the most vulnerable, misunderstood, and mistreated segments of our society. You know, in all honesty, I would never have wanted to be associated with the NRA, even if it had remained primarily interested in marksmanship and firearm safety. I used to go hunting with my dad, but I grew out of that by age 14, and I haven't had any use personally for firearms since then. I don't think the Second Amendment is any more important than any other part of our Constitution, and I can't help but notice how many other democratic societies seem to get along just fine without any constitutional guarantee of the right to firearm ownership at all. But while the NRA in any form was never going to be my cup of tea, at least in its first 100 years or so, it wasn't willfully obstructing public safety and social progress. The NRA, as it was reborn in 1977, as it exists today, reflects the priorities and panders to the fears and prejudices of fringe-dwelling extremists. The only difference between the NRA and the rest of the radical right is that the NRA has serious political clout. Over the last 40 years, it's made gun owners into the most powerful special interest group in the United States. As long as that's true, meaningful reform to our country's gun laws will be difficult to accomplish. Difficult but not impossible. My modest recommendation, get out and vote every time there's an election. Find out which candidates on your ballot are supported by the NRA and vote against them. Better yet, find out which candidates are hated by the NRA and not only vote for them, but contribute to them. Volunteer on their campaigns. Do whatever you can do to get those candidates elected, because the truth is, meaningful reform of our gun laws will not happen in this country until the NRA has more enemies in our local, state, and federal governments than friends. Now, that's probably going to take a while, so as long as we're waiting, let's have one more peek at the NRA store. Look at this whimsical bolt-action pen. Instead of a clicker, it's got a bolt-action lever, like a rifle. And look what else, the case is shaped like a bullet. Isn't that fun? Because I don't know how many times I've been writing with a pen and said to myself, I wish this was shaped like a thing that kills things. Then I could know I was truly a man. From your friends at the NRA, just do what we say and no one has to die. No, that doesn't work for us, does it?